Alrighty, guys. Well, hope your day is good. My ear is backed up, so sounds like I'm talking in a tub of water, head's underwater or whatever. I keep getting asked questions on ignition timing advances and stuff, and it's so hard to answer that question. So I figured let's talk about it. Why do we advance the ignition timing? Well, when you alter your exhaust and your transfers and your intake, you're changing where the saw wants to make power at. And one thing that's for sure and for certain is ignition timing directly relates to the fuel and its burn rate. All fuels burn at a given rate, whether it be 87, 93, 110, alcohol, methanol, nitromethane. They all have their own very specific rate of burn. What that is, I couldn't tell you in measurements or whatever, but so let's say at 1,000 RPM, because in a perfect world, at top dead center, it should spark and then bring this down. Well, because let's just keep numbers simple for math. Say at 1,000 RPM, you need a certain amount of advance, let's just say 10 degrees, before top dead center, to get because fuel burns at a given rate. You got to ignite your charge before top dead center, so by the time this kicks over, it's already across, and ideally, by the time this cracks, you want everything burnt and done expanded by that time, but it's never the case, and that's why the exhaust comes out with such a force, is because as it's coming out, it's still igniting the charge, and a two-stroke wastes a lot of energy that could be pushed more onto the piston and crankshaft assembly. But so let's just say you're doing 10 degrees every time, bang, and it fires. Well, you rev this thing up to say 8,000 RPM. Because the fuel burns at the same rate as it did at 1,000 RPM, you need more advance to get the fuel burning sooner, or you're going to be getting less power at higher RPM, and so on and so forth. Like when I was building race engines, we would run anywhere between 34, 38 degrees total timing advance, which means at like 8,500 RPM or whatever, we would be at 34 degrees total advance before top dead center, and that's because fuel burns at a given rate. You can change the rate of how the fuel burns by adding oxidizers and stuff, but even after you've oxygenated your fuel and stuff, it still burns at a given rate. You need timing advance. That's why a lot of coils and stuff have like a curve built into them. They start out sometimes at 0 or a little bit behind 0, so you can start them, and then as it speeds up, the dwell time and everything changes on the coil, and you get a timing curve. So like say if this is at 1,000 and this is at 8,000 or whatever, it has more timing advance. Well, when you modify these things and you're pushing higher up in like the 10 and 12K mark, you need to reclock your flywheel to take this curve that it's got and essentially bump it, over here, so you can extract more power for your port work. And that's how that works. I typically like to advance if it's one I'm ringing to the moon, I like to advance it until I get too much timing, and then you'll hear it like popping in the cut, and then typically I'll just back it off between 5 and 10 thousandths after that and see how it behaves. Sometimes I'll back it off 5 thousandths and then I'll play with the plug gap. You can play with your plug gap too, and it changes the amount of time it sparks too. But how are these little engines getting their ignition? You got a pair of magnets right here that when they pass the coil here, it creates and breaks a magnetic field which induces a voltage in here, and this is essentially a step-up transformer. It induces a voltage into the low side, then as soon as it passes, the field is broken, it jumps over to the high side, which ups the voltage considerably. And what the voltage is on these, I don't know. It's probably in the 20,000 range or so. But that voltage is derived from how many coils of windings it's got in there. But and then that's stepped up, and it's run up because it's looking for the shortest path to ground. It's running up the plug wire to the plug, and then it jumps over because the spark plug's grounded. It bridges that gap right there, and that's what gets your spark. And changing the resistance of your plug can make the coil work harder, and you'll end up getting a hotter spark. The downside with these is after a certain RPM, you run out of dwell time. A lot of coils will they need to spin this at a certain speed to get enough voltage to get a good strong spark, but then after a certain speed, it's so fast that it's actually losing saturation time, dwell time, whatever the time that it needs to saturate fully to get a good spark. And that's why a lot of coils and stuff will fizzle out at higher RPM. And like on race cars and stuff, that's why they do like capacitive discharges and higher voltage coils and stuff, to the coils that are better suited for higher RPM because they need less dwell time or whatever. But that's how that works. And as far as fuel is concerned, you got 87. That's what I run on all my stuff. When you add your two-stroke oil, it ups the octane automatically. I like 87 because it's a more reactive fuel than, say, 93 or 110. Where you run into needing more fuels is where if you've jacked your compression up so high that when this is coming up, if you're losing, if it's pre-igniting before the spark plug does, which basically spark knocking or whatever, which means just from the heat and speed that this is coming up, and when it comes up there, if this is igniting the charge before you want it to, it's putting too much negative pressure back, and you're actually losing power, from the rotation in there that's pushing against you, more than it's pushing on the other side. You're losing control of it. That's when you need to step up your fuels. Typically, if I stay between 210 and 180, I don't have a problem with 87 and two-stroke mix. The more oil you add, obviously, the more stable the fuel becomes. That's all you're doing is a higher octane fuel is just a cooler burning fuel, and it's actually harder to ignite. With the higher compression chamber or combustion chamber pressures, that harder to ignite fuel becomes more stable and is easier to control your fire with the plug. That's why we do that. But I get asked all the time. There's a lot of people that are confusing because you've got port timing, which is your exhaust, transfers, and intake. Some people work off total durations. I can do either. I typically go by first cracks and first shut off. Like when I throw a wheel on, typically I'll come down I'll get this reading first. As soon as that cracks where you get your squeak of light through, that's the reading I write down. As soon as this cracks, and if it's a tapered slope like this one, I go off the one that cracks first, which would be that back one right here, and then I'll bump it back a little bit, and then I'll check when this shuts off. That's where I get my numbers. If you're wanting to work off from full port duration or whatever, you can use Joe's little digital wheel, and then you can bring this, you'd want to come down, you'd want to bring that up right there. As soon as I shut my compressor off, it never fails. Can't go without compressed air, but I swear to God that thing knows whenever I turn a camera on or I'm on the phone. Where was I talking about? Okay, yeah, with Joe's wheel on there, if you want to go off total port timing, second that cracks open, zero the wheel out, bring it all the way around until you get to the exact same spot again, and clip it off, take your reading. And then that would be your total intake timing. Whatever that total intake timing is, divide it by 2, and whatever that number is, bring the wheel back up to where you get that your divided number, and then re-zero the wheel out, and then you know that you're right there, that that wheel is now zeroed. And then you can come down here and check to see when your exhaust opens and when them open. And same thing if you want to know your port duration with Joe's wheel on that, second that cracks, zero it out, bring it all the way back around until it shuts, and then that'll tell you your port duration there. And same thing with the exhaust, second it cracks, zero it out, so it comes back around and shuts back off. And for those that want to work off port timing, or you can use the numbers that like I go off from them. If I want to know the port timing, I just do a little bit of math. But you know, because sometimes I use Joe's wheel, sometimes I use my wheel, sometimes I freeball it. If especially if it's a saw that I've done several of and know how they behave. It just depends on what I'm trying to do with the saw. But let's get back talking about ignition timing. There's a few different ways of achieving it. Sometimes I will come in here with a Dremel and I will carve out the key slot right here. If the keyway is in the flywheel, sometimes I'll carve off a little bit on the keyway. Sometimes if there's a lot of play in the bolts, you can get around with moving your, rotating your coil a little bit. I typically like taking it off. If it's in the crankshaft's in the key, I like taking it off the keyway, because if all else fails, you can either buy another keyway or you can slip in filler material to keep backing it off. And on that video I showed where I slipped a little piece of filler material in and then brought the flywheel back up tight to the filler material, I left that in there. I didn't build another key. Once it's in there, I just used it to hold the flywheel in its exact location where I wanted it, and snug the flywheel down. Once the flywheel's down, it holds tight on the taper unless something catastrophic happens. I have seen steel, the plastic fin flywheels, the composite flywheels, I have seen steels blow up and lock up suddenly and actually shift their core magnets. I had a 660 once that nobody could figure out. Come in, blow it up, the guy rebuilt it, and he could not get it to run. And then I did some investigating and found out that the magnets had shifted on the flywheel. So that's one bad thing with them composite flywheels. Plus side is they're pretty light. I prefer a composite flywheel over like this style flywheel. That's just me though. So let's see here. So that's why we advance the timing there. If you get too far advanced, it's almost like the same thing as spark knock. If it's not pulling enough RPM where you need it, you're actually sparking too soon before, and it's putting great amounts of pressure on there. But the reason we advance it is because fuel burns at a given rate, and as RPM increases, you need more timing. The harder you spin it, you need more time to get that fuel to burn. So I hope that helps somebody out. I'm not going to make this a real long tips and trick video. It's so hard to keep answering questions. It's hard for me to get what's in my head out across my mouth and onto the board. There's other people that make it look easy, but that's the gist of a timing advance. I hope it helps somebody out. You know, there's quite a bit of stuff that goes, you know, through on an ignition. There's the stuff people don't think about, like dwell time and saturation time of the coil, all that good stuff. So let me know if you guys like this. And I got a lot going on today. I got to get back into it, Dad. So, you know, hopefully this helps somebody out. So, just a real quick video on ignition timing. You guys have a good one.